Welcome to another episode of the 10-Minute Land Surveyor. Los Angeles County has suffered some devastating fires this year in the Eaton Fire and the Pacific Palisades Fire. City blocks were wiped out. Entire neighborhoods were burned to the ground. Folks are trying to figure out how to rebuild. Now, part of that rebuilding process is to assemble a set of plans and get them through building and safety. Once it gets through building and safety, then you can get your permits, you can get a contractor, and you can begin to rebuild. Now, getting your plans through building and safety can be a challenge. One of the things that can help you get through that process quicker is if you have a good set of plans on the first submittal. Because subsequent submittals, if they require additional work, people get busy, they sit on somebody's desk, they get returned back to an engineer, back to a surveyor, and then they get back in line to get resubmitted. So if you can get approval on that first submission, you will save weeks and possibly months. Today I'm going to talk about some of the things you can do to better protect yourself from scallywags and carpetbaggers that are going to roll in and try to take advantage of the folks who are in desperate need of services. I'm also going to discuss some of the different professionals that will most likely be required for the project. Before I start, there are people who watch this channel who are not from California and are not from Southern California. So I'd like to take a second to show folks who are just tuning in what we're talking about when we talk about Pacific Palisades in particular. I'm familiar with Pacific Palisades. I've worked in the area, I have friends in the area, and we have friends that lost their home in these fires. And so we're very familiar with that neighborhood and the devastation. I'm going to take just a couple minutes here and show folks what it looks like. If you look at the screen here, you'll see Los Angeles, Glendale, Burbank, Santa Monica, Malibu. Pacific Palisades is between Malibu and Santa Monica, right in this area. You'll see Calabasas up here. If you're a Kardashian fan, you'll know that's where they live. From a bird's eye view, this looks like any other neighborhood in Los Angeles. But watch what happens when we zoom in and look at the actual neighborhoods. Look at the devastation here. Block after block, burned to the ground. It's just horrible. And Pacific Palisades was a very unique place. You had tree-lined streets with very old trees. It had a real sense of community. It was a bedroom community. A lot of families lived there, and a lot of families had lived there for many, many years. And if you look here, you can just see the devastation. It's just horrible. I just picked a random intersection, and I'm going to show you what this area looked like prior to the fires. Currently, you see all these burned out homes. I'm not even sure which intersection this. Before I go into the technical details of submitting plans and particularly site plans, I want folks to know that the representative of your area, this is the unincorporated territory of Los Angeles County, and your supervisor is a woman by the name of Lindsay Horvath. I don't know Miss Horvath. I did attend a homeowners association meeting and she was in attendance. And I tell you, I think she's a very serious person. I'll give you an example as to why I'm saying this is they had a number of local agency bureaucrats there, and they're talking about trying to get organized and what needs to happen. And one of the things that came up is they said that they needed to create a form for people to submit to the county. Somebody asked, well, how long is that going to take? And the person there said, well, we think we can have that done in a week. And Ms. Horvath said, wait a minute, it is not going to take you a week to produce a form for these people. I don't see any reason why you can't have that done tomorrow. I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to her. Broadly speaking, the process goes like this. You assemble a team of professionals, and these professionals are going to put together a set of plans. You're going to have an engineer that deals with structures and grading. You're going to have a surveyor that deals with property lines, topography, and certifications. You're going to have an architect that is going to do building design and materials, and you're going to most likely have a geologist and or soils tech to check the soils. And that generally makes up the team. Each one of these professionals have different duties, and they generally don't overlap. They rely on each other. The new construction begins with a set of plans, and the plans are assembled by a team of professionals. They're submitted to building and safety. Building and Safety is going to review and ideally approve the plans, and then you'll be able to get your permits. Once you have your permits, your contractor can begin working. Let's talk about what these different professionals do. You're going to have a professional engineer. They're generally responsible for grading, structures, fixed works. You're going to have a professional land surveyor. The land surveyor does property boundaries, topography, and certifications. You have an architect. The architect is responsible for building design and materials, and then there's going to be a geologist, and they're responsible for soils testing. Now, this is an important thing. You need to verify that the folks that you're hiring are licensed to do the work that you're hiring them to do. It sounds crazy to think that there are people out there representing themselves as an engineer or as a surveyor and they're not licensed, but it's more commonplace than you would imagine. What happens is when we had the fires in the early 90s down in San Diego, we get these carpetbaggers coming in from out of state and they're just doing quick hits. They're not necessarily licensed in this state. A lot of times they aren't, and they're just in and out and nobody ever knows what happens to them. I saw that in Oakland also in the fires in the 90s. It happened in Santa Rosa when they had the fires up there, and it is sure to happen here in Los Angeles. So you need to protect yourself from unlicensed practice. How do you do that? Well, the Board for Professional Engineers, Land Surveyors, and Geologists, they're all under the same licensing board. So if you Google Board for Professional Engineers License Lookup, it's going to give you a prompt. And on that prompt, you can type in the person's name, you can type in their license number if you have that, and you can verify that they are actually licensed in the discipline that they're representing to you. That's a very important step. Now, I would go one step further. You can be licensed in California and live out of state and legally practice in this state. However, I think that's a problem. And the reason is people who do the work need to be on site periodically and they need to supervise the staff. And I don't think you're going to do the ideal job of supervising from Texas or from Tennessee or from Boise. I think you're better protected hiring people that are in California. Also, think about this. When you spend money on professional services to somebody that is resident to California, they're paying that 13% tax that we all pay, which is going to help build those schools and rebuild those streets and rebuild the infrastructure. And those people are vested in this community and they're vested in the rebuilding of California. If you ship your money off to Austin or you ship your money off to Denver or wherever people go these days, then that money goes to that community because they don't pay California's state tax. And so you're basically weakening our own infrastructure here. Maybe that engineer, maybe that land surveyor lost their home in this fire. So I would encourage you to buy California and to make sure that the folks on your job are licensed. And in my opinion, ideally, they live in California. On the screen here, I'm just going to walk you through the website. This is the license lookup for the Board for Professional Engineers, Land Surveyors, and Geologists. And when you go down from their opening page here, it says look up professional engineers, geologists, land surveyors. So when you get the prompt here, you can look it up by the business name, the license type, first and last name, or the license number. Okay, let's talk about your submittals to LA County. If you have a clean submittal with all of the minimum requirements met, then you are likely to get your approval without multiple resubmittals. Now, resubmittals are a bigger problem today than they are historically. The reason is as time goes on, more people are going to have their teams assembled and they're going to be submitting more plans. So then you're going to go in behind those folks. So if you have a set of plans and you're early and you get them in, and then you have to get a resubmittal because you have too many corrections without an approval, then you get those corrections back to your professional team. They're going to work on them or not because they're likely to be very busy, and then you go back in line, and that line's going to get longer as time goes. So it's very important that you have a good team of professionals that understand these submittals and that you put them in, and that they meet the minimum requirements. Let's take a look at the minimum requirements now. You see here, these are minimum plan submittal requirements. Now I want to draw your attention to something here. It says, when required, plans must be wet stamped and signed by a licensed architect or engineer registered in the state of California. Keep that in mind. As per what I highlighted on the screen, you're required to show the easements and restricted use areas with dimensions. And so easements would be, an example would be an Edison easement along the back line of the property for poles. How do you find out where these easements are? Because a lot of times the professionals are going to task you with the responsibility of providing that information. Now, you'll find it in the homeowners documents when you purchase your property. It'll be in the form of a title insurance policy, and inside of that policy it's going to list all of your easements. In the event that you don't have this paperwork, or it's long gone, or things have changed, or it's been 30 years, then you're going to want to plan on ordering a preliminary title report. And you can contact a title company, and they're going to cost anywhere from $750 up to about $1,400. And it's necessary for you to get this information because a minimum requirement is to show all the easements. Now, here's something interesting. It says here that you're going to need a wet stamped set of plans with an architect or engineer. Easements and plotting easements and determining the location of easements is the exclusive domain of a land surveyor. So if you have an engineer or architect plotting easements on the boundary, you're going to have a problem getting this through building and safety. Let's look back at these plans. Okay, on the screen here you see two things. You see all structures to property line setback dimensions, existing and proposed, and location of all property lines. Now this is important. Your property lines can only be determined by a licensed land surveyor, and it's very important that they're established on the ground. Why is that? Your property lines will determine the width of the property. The setbacks are the closest you can put a structure to that property line. Typically you have 5-foot setbacks on the sides, 20-foot setback in the front, and I'm not saying that's what it is for your neighborhood, but that's a common setback. So if you don't have accurate property lines, and this is what happens, let's say that your lot was supposed to be 50 feet wide and you have 5 on each side, so now you have a 40-foot wide house, and the architect does their work and they design a 40-foot wide house, and that means that all the windows and doors and everything is built with this structure being 40 feet. Neighbor questions where your property line is, and let's find out that you only have 39.5. You can't put that house 40 feet wide because the lot isn't as big as the house was designed for. And this happens. So you have to know where your property lines are before you design your house, or you may be redesigning. So you ask yourself, how is that possible? Well, here's how it's possible. Architects or engineers that aren't allowed to practice land surveying, they'll take an assessor's map, or they'll take the record dimensions of what your lot was 60, 70, 80 years ago from the underlying tract map, and so it showed a 50-foot wide lot. However, it may not have been 50 feet. And how would you know? The house has been there for 60, 70 years, and you need to have it surveyed so that you know what the width of your lot is, so that you design a house that fits on the lot. So what happens is, if you try to cheat that house in, you're usually going to have a setback certification. And so the surveyor will come out, he'll establish the lines at that time, and he'll tell you that the forms before they pour don't fit within the setbacks. And now you're talking about huge delays and you're talking about huge cost. So make sure that you have the boundaries established as shown here, and that those setbacks aren't to a record boundary. So you ask yourself, how do I know if I have a record boundary? I'm going to go into that in detail. But one of the very quickest ways you can tell is you don't have any monuments on your site plan. Monuments are something that surveyors set to delimit boundaries and to mark property lines. And if you don't see any monuments on your site plan, that thing's going to get kicked back, and you don't want the design to that boundary based on no monuments or 2 monuments. In our industry, we call that a 2-monument tango, and it's nothing but trouble. Next, it says grade elevations at property line corners, at driveways, and the garage floor. Okay, that means that you're going to have topography of the existing site, and the garage floor or the house structure is going to have a finished floor elevation, and that's generally the highest point on the lot, and all your grading comes down from that. And so the surveyor is going to come out and do a topography survey. I don't know what that's going to look like once the Army Corps of Engineers gets in there and clears this out. I don't know what's going to be left. Either way, you're going to need topography so that the engineer can design a grading plan to make sure that when it rains, this property drains correctly. Okay, next, you're looking at all buildings and structures on the adjacent property within 10 feet of the property line. Adjacent structure needs to be surveyed also, and you notice that the key word here is property line. Again, you need those property lines surveyed and ideally monumented. You can be penny wise and pound foolish. Now, next we go to the site survey, and here it says, when required, shall contain the following information: State of California license number of a surveyor, location of the property lines, structures of property, and or grade elevations and topography. So this is just a reiteration of the standards that I went through earlier. I'm going to show you some examples of the topography and the site plan that the engineer and architect rely on to do their work. As you can see, the land surveyor has a big role in the plans. If they don't have a licensed land surveyor involved and you're dealing with an engineer and architect and they're working outside of a licensed land surveyor, it's going to cost you time on the back end of this job and put you in a longer line. And I'm not trying to sell you survey. Now, the average person wouldn't know the difference between a record boundary, something that came out of the public records, and an established boundary by a licensed land surveyor. I cannot stress enough the importance of having a licensed land surveyor involved in the project. One of the things you need to know about land surveyors that's different than engineers and different than architects, we have folks out there that survey, but they don't have licenses, or they offer land surveying services without a license. And it's far more common, I believe, in the land surveying profession than it is the engineering or the architecture. Now, even if the architect or the engineer recommends a surveyor, you need to verify that that surveyor is actually licensed, because occasionally these architects and engineers don't realize the problems with the unlicensed practice, and they always have a guy that can come over and help. A little later in the video, I'm going to give you some tips on how to avoid unlicensed practice. LA County is not unique. They are a little more sophisticated than some of the smaller agencies that generally run the site plans through planning, and they don't have the involvement of a land surveyor. But the basis of the boundaries shown here in the California Building Code. This is section 106.2 site plans. I believe it's been renumbered to 107 now. But if you look here, it says that the site plan shall be drawn in accordance with an accurate boundary line. And again, it has to do with setbacks. To give you a sense of the prevalence of unlicensed practice, I'm just going to Google California site plans. Okay, so I Googled California site plans, and I haven't actually done this before. And I see the first one here is obtain a site plan for permits. Well, let's see what we get for that. Okay, we get a site plan, our site plan packages. Let's see. Oh, look at this. Bronze is $79, and you get all the way up to a platinum, which is $199. Our capabilities: customized site plan drawings, site plans, plot plan for building permit, no site inspection necessary. That's interesting. Oh, look at this right here, big letters. This is not a legal survey, nor is it intended to be or replace one. Well, I just went through the minimum standards required for LA County, and there's survey all over the place. This is the kind of thing that I was warning you about. If it's not a survey, it's not going to go to building and safety. Let's see what else they have to say. No on-site inspection necessary. Well, then how are you going to get the topography? How are you going to get the boundary established? How are you going to show that relationship from the structures to the property line? I'm going to go back to the price here for a second. Your bronze is $79 and your platinum is $199. For a licensed land surveyor, you can expect to pay $200 or more per hour. And to get a site plan, let's just take a generic residential lot in a subdivision. To get the topography and the boundary established, and that boundary can be tricky. It depends on what's been done before. But I think you're gonna spend anywhere from $6,000 to $12,000 depending on the details. You may find a small shop that's very reputable. They may be able to do a little less than $6,000, but they only have the capacity to do so many surveys in a day or in a week. If you can find that person for $4,500 and they're going to do everything correctly, they're licensed, good for you. but you better be the first person to call them because their work's going to stack up. There's no way you're going to get a site plan for $199 from a licensed professional. Let's take a look under images and see what it comes up with. ADU plans, residential architectural. I haven't really looked this over, but now that we have you here, let's look to see what you get. Let's look at the Institute of Justice mapping, and it says most popular. Institute for Justice, California mapping. I am familiar with this case. California mapping. Entrepreneur fined $1,000 for using public information to draw lines on maps. This Crown Home v. Moore. Moore is the executive officer for the Board for Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. And this Crown Home was turning out site plans like the last one I showed you, and there's ongoing litigation there. I believe it's in the appellate courts now. Okay, I understand. You just want to get back to your life being normal. You want to get your building plans in, you want to get them approved, you want to get your permits, you want to get a contractor, you want to get your house built, and you want to get on with your life. You don't have the time to learn the ins and outs of land surveying or engineering or architecture. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips here to make sure that you don't get ripped off. Take a look at the screen here. This is a monument set to mark your legal property corner. And this is a pipe. This one happens to be a 1-inch outside diameter steel pipe. They're generally 18 inches long, and this one was set down about a foot. Now, what you will notice here is that this has the licensee's number right here. Land Surveyor license number 2326, and that's important. So what does that mean to you? Well, those should be set at your corners, and if they're not at your corners, then you want them set. So when you're contracting with a licensed land surveyor, you're going to tell them, I want my property corners monumented. And that's exactly how you say it. I want my property corners monumented. They will be tagged by law. They're required to set their license number on those monuments. Now, if they say, well, it's going to be a lot of work for me to set those property corners, it actually takes 10 minutes to drive an iron pipe in the ground once you know where it goes. So that's not true. Or they're going to want to set wood stakes that are painted orange on top and put a nail in there, and they're going to label the stake that's next to it. It's going to say property corner. Well, that doesn't tell anybody going forward who set that stake because they don't tag them. If that surveyor resists setting tagged monuments to represent your property corners, you have to stop and ask yourself, why are they trying to save me money by not setting these monuments? Those monuments can be set for a couple $100 a piece. And the surveyor is actually in the business of setting monuments. So when they provide resistance and say, well, if I set that, it's going to cost you more money, and they start making these excuses as to why they don't want to monument your property corners, you've smelled the rat. If they turn over work product and you look at it and there's only 2 monuments shown on that work product, there's a really good chance that you're not getting what you paid for. I'll show you a couple examples here. On the screen here is an example of a topographic survey, and what you see here these are elevations, the dwelling, the house, the street address, a shed, and this is very common. What you're going to want to see on your survey, and you're going to want to also see it on the ground, is down here. This is set tag LS4743. That's the licensed surveyor's number. And by law, we're required to put our license number on all the monuments we set. And this is at a 2-foot offset from the corner. Let's see if we have anything else. Here it is again. Set tag LS4743, flush at the lot corner. This is a good surveyor doing the right thing. Going up to the next property corner. Here it is. You need to see that your maps show setting monuments. Now, they can do it a couple different ways, but I would ask that it's shown on the site plan, and I would physically inspect it. And when you look at it, it should look something like this. And you'll see an iron pipe, or you'll see it drilled out in concrete, and these tags are a little bigger than a penny, and they're stamped with the license number. If you don't see that license number, then you've been taken for a ride. If you see a scribed cross or a wood stake, that surveyor is trying to get out of their legal requirements. When those monuments are set, your contractors are going to rely on them to establish your property lines, and they're going to use those to pull in your setbacks to put your building in. And that will ensure that your building fits on the lot and that your building is in the correct location. Now, when a surveyor sets monuments, they're required to file a record with the county surveyor. And that record will either be a record of survey or a corner record. Any work product you get from a land surveyor should have a signature and seal. On the screen is a record of survey. And the record of survey is required to be filed, or a corner record, anytime we set a monument representing a property corner. So if you have a surveyor that says they aren't going to set monuments, tagged monuments, or that they're going to have to file a record of survey and it's going to cost you an absorbent amount of money, or they're going to have to file a record, you have to ask yourself, why wouldn't they want to file a record? Think about this. Surveyors get paid to survey. And so if a surveyor is required to do something by law, why are they going to try to save you money by not filing this record? That should be a red flag. Surveyors are in the business of filing maps. If you made it this far in the video, let's wrap it up with the key takeaways. The key takeaway is that you need licensed professionals to do the work to rebuild. You do not want to be penny wise and pound foolish and get unlicensed people in the mix. Next, we walk through LA County's minimum plan requirements. And going through those minimum plan requirements, you need a civil engineer, you need an architect, and you need a licensed land surveyor. I put a heavy emphasis on the land surveyors for two reasons. One is I am a land surveyor, and the second one is that's the most likely person that you will encounter that doesn't have a license offering services. Although somebody living out of state is not prohibited from working in California if they're properly licensed, I would strongly encourage you to hire professionals that live and work in California. The reason being is they're vested in our communities. They're vested in the rebuilding. There's a good chance that there were civil engineers and licensed land surveyors that lost their homes. They could use the extra work to get back to the position to rebuild their houses. They're going to be paying that 13% California tax rate, which is going to go into your schools and into your neighborhoods to help fix things. You ship that money off to Austin, Nashville, Boise, and it's gone for good. So I would encourage you to buy California. Lastly, if you're watching this video and you say, wow, that guy sure seems to know what he's doing and seems to have a lot of experience in LA County, and that's true on both accounts. However, I'm not in a position to do this type of work right now. We're very busy doing some work for the federal government, state and local governments, and we don't have any capacity for this. I would recommend that you go to the California Land Surveyors Association's website, CLSA, and there's Find a Surveyor tab on there. So you can go in and you can look by county. Now you'll find that surveyors travel quite a ways. So it wouldn't be uncommon for you to have a surveyor from Ventura County to come down, somebody from Orange County to go up, or somebody from the Inland Empire to come in and do this work. If they're coming in from Arizona, Las Vegas, Sacramento, I would stop and question as to why somebody from Sacramento would drive down here to do a lot survey. If you're one of the folks that lost your house in the Pacific Palisades Fire or the Eaton Fire, I'm sorry that happened to you. I hope that you can get back on your feet sooner than later. I hope that you can get your plans through LA County Building and Safety, get a new house built, and get on with your life. This video is one of several that I intend on recording to help folks navigate building and safety and the planning process to get through LA County Building and Safety and get on with their life. Thank you and have a nice day.